in the stories we tell. If you liked the story, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to support the channel. On the day of the grand wedding, my bridal sedan chair came to a halt in front of the residence of the newly appointed third scholar, Lawrence Tang. The matchmaker raised her voice high in congratulation, and the main streets were flooded with red silk, offering blessings to me. I was just about to step over the saddle when my groom, Lawrence, reached out his hand to block my path. Elizabeth Gu, wait. His voice was very soft, yet it felt like a basin of cold water, extinguishing the entire festive atmosphere. Through the gap in my red veil, I saw a woman with pearl flowers in her hair, her belly slightly protruding, standing on the steps and looking at us with a pitiful expression. Was it his widowed aunt by marriage, Phoebe Lynn? Lawrence's voice seemed to carry a sense of tragic sentiment, a self-righteous sacrifice, as it rang in my ears. Aunt Phoebe often helped me grind ink and light the lamps. My uncle passed away over a year ago, leaving her lonely and suffering, and now she is pregnant. Therefore, I wish to follow the example of the ancients and practice the levirate custom, allowing her to enter the household alongside you. You two can address each other as sisters and manage the household affairs together, which could be considered the making of a beautiful legend. The entire venue fell silent as a graveyard. I nearly laughed out of anger. Right before praying to the gods, the marriage contract clearly stated in black ink on white paper that for 3 generations, there would be no taking of concubines. Yet today, on the very day of my grand wedding, he wanted to force a pregnant co-wife upon me. I tightened my grip on the fan in my hand, shedding no tears and making no scene. It was just that, amidst the astonished gazes of everyone, I ripped the red veil from my head and viciously threw it onto the ground. Lawrence. My voice was clear yet frigid, drowning out all the whispers. You have already destroyed your own dignity, so I have no need to save face for you anymore. I am calling off this marriage. I cannot bear to accept the so-called virtuous reputation of a new third scholar like you. The red veil drifted down to the ground like a butterfly with broken wings, stained with dust. Wearing the phoenix crown and the heavy wedding robe, I stood before everyone, my eyes cold as snow and bone, piercing straight toward Lawrence. He evidently did not expect me to be so decisive. The look of pity on his face froze in an instant, shifting to shock and embarrassment. Elizabeth, what kind of scene are you making? Pick up the veil immediately. He lowered his voice, his words carrying a hint of a command. Making a scene. I gave a cold laugh, my voice not loud but echoing clearly in front of the Tang residence gates. Lawrence, in front of all these guests, you want to force upon me a widowed aunt with whom you have committed adultery to be a co-wife? Yet you accuse me of making a scene. 10 years of studying the books of the sages, where have all those lessons gone? My words were like individual slaps, whipping straight across Lawrence's face, and whipping across the face of the entire Tang family. The guests immediately erupted, the sound of gossip rising like a tide. Heavens, the daughter of the Minister of Personnel is being humiliated to this extent. Has this Lawrence gone mad? He has just become the third scholar and is already so arrogant that he forgets himself. Even taking a co-wife, that woman is his elder. This matter is truly a corruption of family values. Lawrence's face turned from red to white, and then from white to green. Behind him, Phoebe could no longer maintain that pitiful facade. She held her belly with one hand and pointed at me with the other, her voice trembling. Miss Gu, how can you slander the innocence between myself and Lawrence like that? We were forced by circumstances, and furthermore, I merely have a special constitution that results in a late pregnancy. Forced by circumstances. I looked at her, my eyes filled with contempt. What a convenient excuse. A nephew and his aunt conceiving a child in secret, yet you still have the audacity to stand before me, the legal wife, and claim a status based on a late pregnancy. Widow Lin, your late husband's bones are not yet cold, and even in death, he is forced to wear a green hat. Are you worthy of him? Lawrence, you are the third scholar personally appointed by His Majesty, yet you commit such a vile act. Are you worthy of the reputation of a disciple of the Son of Heaven? Every word I spoke stabbed straight into their hearts, pressing them step by step. Lawrence was questioned into silence, unable to utter a word. His parents behind him had faces as gray as ash, wishing they could find a crack in the ground to crawl into right there. He likely assumed that as the daughter of a minister, I valued face above all else and would simply endure such a situation, closing the doors to resolve it privately. He was wrong. My father is the current Minister of Personnel, with students and old friends spread across the realm. What I have seen and heard since childhood was never the jealous bickering of the inner courtyard, but the thunderous tactics of the imperial court. To deal with a shameless person, the most effective method is to expose all of his shamelessness to the light of day, leaving him no place to hide. Men. I turned and shouted to our family steward who was escorting the procession. Yes, miss. The steward immediately stepped forward. Carry all of the dowry back to the manor. Furthermore, go to the Yemen to process the paperwork. State clearly that I, Elizabeth, and the Tang family's third scholar, Lawrence, are annulling our engagement. From now on, men marry and women wed, each going their own way, having no relation to one another. Understood. The steward accepted the order and left, his actions decisive and without hesitation. Lawrence completely panicked. He rushed forward, wanting to grab my hand. Elizabeth, do not be impulsive. Things are not what you think. We can discuss this again. I forcefully shook my sleeve, avoiding his touch. There is nothing to discuss. I looked at him and spoke every word distinctly, my voice as cold as the frost of the 12th lunar month. Lawrence, remember this well. A daughter of the Gu family will absolutely never share a husband, and certainly will not marry a man so shameless that he disregards all moral principles. Having said that, I did not deign to look at him one more time. I turned and stepped onto the Gu family carriage. The curtains fell, shutting out all the noise and ugliness behind me. I heard Lawrence screaming in frustration. I heard his mother weeping, and I heard the guests laughing in mockery. None of that had anything to do with me anymore. My battlefield had shifted from the small gates of this Tang residence to the imperial court of tomorrow. Lawrence, do you think this is merely a family matter? You are too naive. What you have tarnished is not only the reputation of myself, Elizabeth, but also the very title of third scholar bestowed by the current emperor. What you have shaken is the very foundation of the civil service examination's selection of virtuous scholars. The carriage wheels rumbled as it steadily returned to the minister's manor. There was no longer the scene of festive joy filling the streets, only a heavy silence remained. Mother was already waiting at the door, seeing me return alone, with my phoenix crown askew. Her eyes immediately turned red, and she hurried forward to support me. My child, you have suffered a grievance. I shook my head, taking Mother's hand and walking into the inner hall with her. Mother, I have not suffered a grievance. I merely cut my losses in time. Father, Alexander Gu, was sitting in the master's chair, his expression as deep as water, holding a cup of tea that had long since gone cold. He did not ask me about the process, as his spies outside the manor had obviously reported everything already. Father. I stepped forward to bow to him. He set the teacup down and looked up at me. There was not a ripple in those deep eyes. You are back. Yes, very good. He nodded, his tone calm. You are truly worthy of being the daughter of Alexander. You have decisiveness and you have backbone. Mother stood beside him and said anxiously, My lord, now is not the time to say such things. The Tang family is bullying people too excessively. This matter absolutely cannot be left as it is. Father waved his hand, signaling Mother to calm down for the moment. He looked at me and asked, Elizabeth, did you tell Lawrence that you would make his so-called virtuous reputation known throughout the world? Yes, I replied. I believe that this matter is no longer a private affair. Lawrence used his identity as the third scholar to commit acts against moral obligations. What he has corrupted is the discipline of the imperial court, and what he has tarnished is the sagacity of his majesty. If he is not strictly punished, how can we warn those who come after? A glint of approving laughter finally appeared in Father's eyes. Well said. He stood up, took a few steps, and spoke slowly. You only know the surface, but not the depth. Lawrence's actions appear foolish on the outside, but in reality, there are 3 layers of self-righteous calculation behind them. My heart stirred slightly. What Father meant was the first layer, which is also the shallowest. Father held up one finger. He has just passed the examinations, so his foundation is still shallow. Although the Lin family has declined, there are still a few old retainers in the clan who have a voice in the local area. He wanted to use the matter of taking in his widowed aunt to gather the remaining power of the Lin family for himself. Secondly, Father held up a second finger, his gaze becoming sharp. He is testing the limits of our Gu family. He bet that for the sake of family reputation, we would hold our noses and swallow this disgrace. Once we accepted it, he would kill 2 birds with 1 stone, obtaining a beautiful concubine, while not losing the marriage connection with the minister's manor. Later on, he would push his luck even further. I suddenly understood, and my heart grew even colder. Father looked at my grave expression, gave a cold laugh, and then held up a third finger. As for why he dared to test us like this, his support was precisely the third layer of calculation. He thought he had found two protective talismans. The first is his self-righteous benevolence. Father's voice was full of scorn. He is stupid enough to think that just by bringing up the so-called levirate custom of the ancients and draping it in a cloak of not bearing to see a widow suffer, he can silence the world. He even naively assumes that even if this matter reaches His Majesty, the Emperor would hardly punish a sentimental and righteous third scholar too heavily over a matter of custom. The second protective talisman is the daughter of the Gu family. Father's gaze rested on me, carrying a trace of sorrow. He was counting on you, and counting on our Gu family. He calculated precisely that my daughter values reputation the most. Believing a woman does not marry two husbands. The engagement was set. If the Gu family initiated the annulment, your reputation would inevitably be damaged, and future marriage prospects would be difficult. That is why he had the audacity to be so unscrupulous. Father dissected the heart of the matter, exposing all of Lawrence's despicable and filthy calculations without missing a single detail. I had originally thought he was merely blinded by beauty, but I did not expect there to be layer upon layer of such base calculations behind it. He is not only shameless but also stupid to the extreme. He calculated everything, yet he calculated two things wrong. He does not understand the law well, and he misjudged your backbone. Father's voice returned to calmness, but beneath that calm was a thunderstorm about to erupt. He wants to turn a family matter into a chess game, so we shall play with him. Only the board must be defined by us. He turned to instruct the steward. Go, bring all the Ministry of Personnel's files regarding the evaluation of official rank and virtue into my study. The steward accepted the order and left. Father returned to his seat, picked up the teacup, and gently blew on tea leaves that did not actually exist. Elizabeth, you must remember that a true battle has never been about winning or losing with words. It is about finding the opponent's fatal weakness, and using the very thing he takes the most pride in to completely crush him. What does Lawrence take the most pride in? I answered without hesitation. It is his fame, it is his official career path. Father nodded with satisfaction. Correct. He thinks that beneath his feet is a path paved with blue clouds. Tomorrow, I will let him know that it is not a road, but a bottomless abyss. At that moment, looking at Father's calm face, I knew that Lawrence's ending had already been determined. This father of mine has navigated the imperial court for decades. People call him the smiling Yama. He does not strike easily, but once he does, it is with the force of 10,000 thunderbolts. Tonight, the minister's manor was ablaze with lights, while the Tang family was destined for a sleepless night. Sure enough, just as Father had predicted, the Tang family sent someone over. The person who came was none other than Lawrence's mother, Madame Tang. She carried heavy gifts, her face piled high with an ingratiating smile, yet she could not hide the panic in the depths of her eyes. Madame Gu, where is Elizabeth? This is a huge misunderstanding. As soon as she entered the door, she grabbed my mother's hand and began to weep and wail. My mother withdrew her hand without a change in expression and spoke indifferently. Madame Tang, we of the Gu family dare not accept this address of Madame-in-law. Madame Tang's expression stiffened, but she immediately forced another smile. Yes, it is all because of my foolish son. He was just momentarily confused, bewitched by that vixen. You can rest assured we have already kicked Phoebe out. We absolutely will not let her be an eyesore to Elizabeth again. I sat behind the screen, listening to those words, and found it merely amusing. Kicked out. The matter had already caused an uproar throughout the city, and now they wanted to use the words, kicked out, to settle it. Madame Tang. I slowly stepped out from behind the screen, my expression cold. Is the root of this matter truly Phoebe? Seeing me, Madame Tang hurriedly stepped forward. Elizabeth, listen to your aunt, it is all the fault of that wench. Lawrence still has you in his heart. He was just soft-hearted for a moment, committing a mistake that all men in the world make. I cut her off, my eyes icy. Was it adultery with a widowed aunt, or forcing me to accept a co-wife on the day of the grand wedding? Madame Tang, your Tang family's style truly opens my eyes. Her face flushed red like pig liver. I did not mean that. Elizabeth, look, the wedding was all prepared, the dowry too. If you cancel the marriage now, your reputation will not be good either. She began to use my reputation as a threat. That was their trump card. You do not need to worry about my reputation, Madame Tang. I spoke calmly. Compared to marrying into the Tang family, this pit of fire, annulling the marriage, is actually a stroke of luck for me. As for Scholar Tang, I paused, looking into her terrified eyes. and spoke every word clearly. What he should be worried about is not this marriage, but what will become of him. Hearing this, Madame Tang's legs went weak, and she nearly collapsed to the ground. What do you mean by that? Elizabeth, 1 day as husband and wife means 100 days of grace. Although you two have not married, there is still affection, you cannot harm him. Affection. I laughed, but the smile did not reach the depths of my eyes. When I tore that veil down, there was nothing left between us but hatred. See the guest out. I could not be bothered to waste any more words with her and turned to leave. No matter how she screamed behind me, I did not look back. The Tang family, from top to bottom, was immersed in ridiculous self-righteousness. They thought this was merely a woman's jealous squabble in the inner courtyard, and that simply chasing the other woman away would extinguish my anger. They completely failed to understand that what I, Elizabeth, wanted was never for Lawrence to have a change of heart. What I wanted was for him to pay the highest price for what he had done. What I wanted was to make him fall straight from the high clouds, crashing until his bones were shattered. The next morning, at dawn, the sky was not yet fully bright, and the entire capital was still immersed in sleep. Father was already neatly dressed in his court attire, a crimson official robe, with a rigid cap on his head and a solemn expression. I stood at the door of the study, helping him adjust his collar. Father, please be careful in everything. Father patted my hand gently, his eyes steady. Rest assured, I will perform this play very well today. He turned and left, his back as straight as a pine tree. I knew a war without smoke was about to commence in the Golden Throne Hall. Today was the day after the palace examination when the new doctoral scholars would be granted official positions. According to custom, the top scholar, the second scholar, and the third scholar would be prioritized for appointment to prestigious positions such as compilers and editors in the Hanlin Academy, promising a boundless future. Lawrence must be full of anticipation for this moment. He is likely still dreaming of his triumphant success, ascending to the clouds in a single step. He would not know that his life, on this very day, in the place he desires most, will be completely buried. I sat by the window, watching the pale white of dawn gradually appear on the horizon, while the scene in the Golden Throne Hall played out clearly in my mind. The civil and military officials stood in rows on either side, while the emperor, clad in dragon robes, sat high above on his throne. The atmosphere was solemn and heavy, every memorial presented and every glance exchanged could stir up a storm in the imperial court. How would father make his move? Would he stand up like a shrew cursing in the street to accuse Lawrence of being unfaithful and ungrateful to me? That would be the lowest of tactics. He would stand in his position as the Minister of Personnel, from the high vantage point of selecting talent for the nation, using the most dignified reasons to set up a chess game that would doom Lawrence for all eternity. He wanted the emperor to personally determine Lawrence's crime. He wanted Lawrence's demise to become a testament to Alexander's selfless public service and absolute loyalty to the country. That is truly my father's method. To kill a man, one must strike at his heart. I lifted my teacup and took a small sip. The pure, cool scent of the tea mirrored my state of mind at that moment. There was no tension, no anxiety, only anticipation. In the early afternoon, within the Golden Throne Hall, hundreds of officials stood in respectful attendance. The emperor sat on the dragon throne, his demeanor majestic, as various government affairs were presented and handled in turn. Finally, it came to the segment of conferring official positions upon the new doctoral scholars. The officials of the Ministry of Rights finished reading the list, and next was the person who held the power to appoint and transfer officials throughout the realm, the Minister of Personnel, who was also my father. He stepped forward to present the specific memorial regarding the probationary observations for governance. Father, holding his ivory tablet, stepped out of the ranks and stood in the center of the great hall. Your subject, Alexander, Minister of Personnel, has a matter to report. His voice was steady and resonant, echoing throughout the Golden Hall. Permission granted. The Emperor's voice drifted down. Reporting to Your Majesty, the new scholars of this year, after assessment by the Ministry of Personnel, are all men of praiseworthy talent and virtue, totaling 30 individuals. Your subject has determined the list of government offices for them to observe administration, and I beg Your Majesty to review it. A young eunuch walked down the steps, took the memorial from my father's hands, and respectfully presented it to the emperor. The emperor accepted the memorial and slowly opened it. He did not read quickly. His gaze swept over line after line. The court was deathly silent, with only the sound of soft breathing to be heard. Many officials pricked up their ears to listen. They had all heard the bad news about the annulment between the Tang and Gu families yesterday, and at this moment, they all wanted to see how Minister Gu would deal with his would-be son-in-law. Would he use public office to avenge a private grudge and exile him to a remote and desolate place, or would he temporarily endure and hold back for the sake of the bigger picture? The emperor's brows gradually furrowed. He raised his head, his gaze like a torch sweeping across the assembly of officials below, finally resting on my father. Everyone's hearts hung suspended in their throats. It is here. I knew the play was about to begin. Father remained standing with his head bowed, his expression unchanged, as if he had long predicted the emperor's reaction. He was like the most seasoned hunter who had already laid out all the traps and was simply waiting for the prey. Or to be more precise, the highest-ranking referee stepping into the rhythm he had already set. Beloved Minister Gu. The emperor's voice rang out. One could not discern joy or anger, but it carried a pressure that allowed no doubt. Your subject is present. Father bowed and replied. I remember that the third scholar of this session is named Lawrence. Is that correct? Reporting to your majesty, it is indeed this person. During the palace examination, this man's literary talent was brilliant, and his responses were very coherent. I was quite impressed with him. The emperor's fingers tapped lightly on the armrest of the dragon throne. However, I have looked through your entire list, from the Hanlin Academy to the 6 ministries. Why is this person's name the only one missing? As soon as these words were spoken, a soft commotion immediately erupted in the court. Sure enough, Minister Gu had actually crossed Lawrence's name off the list. This was undisguised revenge. Some officials, who had friendship with the Tang family, or who usually disagreed with my father, were already preparing to step out of the ranks to impeach my father for the crime of abusing power for private revenge. However, before they could act, my father bowed once again, a trace of appropriately measured panic in his voice. Your Majesty, please see clearly. Your subject is guilty. The 3 words, subject is guilty, stunned everyone, including the emperor on the dragon throne. He had assumed Alexander would find excuses to evade the issue, but he did not expect him to plead guilty directly. Oh, the emperor's interest was immediately piqued. Of what crime are you guilty? Father raised his head, his face full of grave loyalty to the sovereign and concern for the country. Your subject's crime lies in failing to judge character clearly, nearly recommending to the court a man of corrupt virtue, thereby staining your Majesty's holy hearing. This is your subject's dereliction of duty. With a turn of phrase, he instantly shifted the focus from the suspicion of using public office for private revenge to the official duty of selecting talent for the country. The officials preparing to impeach him immediately looked like ducks being choked. The words that had reached their lips were forced back down. They looked at my father in astonishment. This old fox, he did not want private revenge at all, but rather to use this matter to nail Lawrence firmly to the pillar of shame. The emperor's brows furrowed even tighter. Corrupt virtue. Beloved Minister Gu, where does this statement come from? You must know that falsely accusing a disciple of the Son of Heaven is a grave crime. Father straightened his back and spoke loudly. Your subject dares not speak half a word of falsehood. If there is any untruth, your subject is willing to guarantee it with his own head. The person your subject wishes to impeach is the new 3rd scholar, Lawrence, a man who disregards moral relations and whose virtue does not befit his position. The Golden Throne Hall was so quiet that one could hear a pin drop. All eyes were focused on my father. He knew very well that every word he spoke next would determine the life or death of Lawrence, and at the same time, concerned the reputation of the entire Gu family. I beg your Majesty to allow your subject to report. Father's voice was neither fast nor slow, clear and logical. The great learning in the Book of Rites says, the ancients who wished to illustrate illustrious virtue throughout the kingdom, first ordered well their own states. Wishing to order their states well, they first regulated their families. If a family is not at peace, how can one govern the country? If one is not upright oneself, how can one correct others? The civil service examination is for the court to select the pillars of the nation, placing virtue first and literary talent second. This is the foundation of our dynasty's establishment, and also the teaching of the sages through the ages. He first cited the classics of the sages, occupying the moral high ground. The new 3rd scholar, Lawrence, indeed has praiseworthy literary talent, but his character induces outrage. Yesterday was supposed to be the day of his grand wedding to your subject's daughter. However, right in front of a city full of guests, This person wanted to simultaneously welcome his widowed aunt, who is currently pregnant, into the household, calling her a co-wife and claiming to follow the so-called levirate custom of ancient times. Boom. The imperial court completely exploded. Levirate custom. Those words were like a lightning bolt striking straight into the heart of every civil official. The laws of our dynasty clearly state that levirate marriage is considered incestuous. Among the common people, this is behavior that corrupts customs, worse than that of pigs and dogs. A third scholar personally appointed by the emperor dared to commit such a vile act. This was no longer a family matter, but an open challenge to the ceremonial laws of the state. Father did not give everyone too much time to be horrified and continued speaking. Your Majesty, the Tang Code with commentaries clearly records that for marrying a senior relative's widow, the punishment is 100 lashes. This refers even to an unmarried cousin. Yet the person Lawrence wishes to marry is the widow of his uncle, his elder. This is the great defense of moral relations. For a junior to encroach upon a senior, for a nephew to commit adultery with his aunt, that is incest. Forcing the legal wife to accept this on the wedding day, that is unrighteousness. Being a disciple of the Son of Heaven yet committing beastly acts and corrupting the atmosphere of the scholarly forest, that is disloyalty. How is a man so disloyal, unrighteous, and incestuous worthy of wearing official robes and standing in the imperial court? If such a person can become an official, is it not telling the scholars of the world that as long as one has talent, one does not need virtue? Is it not making the official discipline of our dynasty a laughingstock for the world? If such a person were to guard a region, what crime have the people committed? What crime has the state committed? Your subject boldly implores your Majesty to see clearly. Your subject removed Lawrence's name from the list, not out of private grudge, but for the sake of the national body, for the discipline of the court, and for the reputation of your Majesty. Having finished speaking, Father lifted his official robes, fell to his knees, and kowtowed heavily. Your subject recommends talent for the country and dares not harbor private motives. I beg your Majesty to assign punishment. A series of attacks were unleashed, tight and without a single gap. From the classics of the sages to the laws of the state, then to the atmosphere of the scholarly community, and finally to the nation and society. He did not mention half a sentence about his daughter being humiliated. Every single word was for the country, for his Majesty. He had elevated a family scandal to a level that shook the foundation of the nation. He was not filing a complaint, he was forcing a confession. He was forcing the emperor to issue a verdict to protect discipline and protect his own face. Because the third scholar, Lawrence, was personally appointed by the emperor, if something happened to him, the person losing face would be the emperor himself. Silence. A deathly silence. On the dragon throne, the emperor's expression was so dark it seemed water could drip from it. His chest heaved violently, and veins popped out on the hand gripping the armrest. Anger. A sky-high rage. This anger was not to defend my Gu family, but because he felt he had been deceived and humiliated. The civil service examination is the most important and direct path for the Son of Heaven to select talent. The palace examination is presided over by him personally to demonstrate the vastness of imperial grace and the royal family's regard for scholars. The top 3 individuals appointed by his own hand, the top scholar, the second scholar, and the third scholar, are the models for scholars throughout the realm and the future face of the court. But now, what has happened? The third scholar appointed by him is a shameless scoundrel who committed such a vile and incestuous act as levirate marriage. If this matter spreads, how will the world view it? They will say that he, this emperor, judges people unclearly, that he is an incompetent tyrant. They will say that this year's examination is a great joke of the world. Good, very good, Lawrence. The emperor's voice sounded as if it were squeezed out through clenched teeth, carrying a bone, chilling coldness. What a fine third scholar. He suddenly slammed his hand down on the dragon throne and stood up abruptly. Smack. The loud noise caused the hearts of all the officials in the hall to tighten, and they knelt down in unison. Long live your Majesty, please quell your anger. Quell my anger. The emperor laughed out of extreme rage. How do you propose I quell my anger? My third scholar, a disciple of the Son of Heaven personally appointed by me, wants to take his own aunt as a co-wife on his wedding day. Such a vile matter is truly the greatest joke in the world. This is a slap in my face, a slap in the face of my court, and a slap in the face of all scholars in the realm. He pointed at the group of officials kneeling below and roared. Ministry of Rights, how did you investigate this person's background beforehand? Why could a person with such corrupt virtue pass all the way to the palace examination? The Minister of Rights was scared out of his wits and kowtowed repeatedly. Your Majesty, spare my life, your subject has failed in his duty, your subject is guilty. The Emperor did not bother to listen to his defense at all. His gaze shifted to my father. Alexander, your subject is present. You have done very well. The Emperor's voice was still cold, but within the anger, there was a trace of decisiveness. Selecting people for the country must be like this, placing virtue first. Without virtue, even with earth-shattering talent, one is a disaster to the nation. Not only are you innocent, but you also have merit. I thank your Majesty. Father kowtowed once more. At this moment, the gazes of the officials looking at my father were filled with awe and fear. Too ruthless. This single move not only pushed Lawrence into the abyss, but also helped himself gain the beautiful reputation of selfless public service and sharing the burdens of the country. He was even personally praised by the Emperor, killing without seeing blood. Nothing surpasses this. The Emperor paced back and forth in the hall, finally stopping. The fire of anger in his eyes had turned into icy killing intent. He wanted to kill the chicken to scare the monkeys. He wanted to use Lawrence's blood to wash away the humiliation of himself and the court. He wanted to let the world know clearly what ending awaits those who challenge imperial dignity and the ceremonial laws of the state. Pass down my decree. The Emperor's voice echoed through the great hall like cold ice from the ninth heaven. Everyone held their breath. The new doctoral scholar Lawrence possesses corrupt virtue, disregards moral relations, brings shame to the scholar class, and is unworthy of being an official. Every word was like a heavy hammer, striking down without mercy. Strip him of his title of third scholar immediately. Strip his title. Those 4 words caused many old officials to draw in a sharp breath of cold air. 10 years of studying by the lamp, 1 successful examination. It is the glory that countless scholars dream of for a lifetime. To be stripped of the title is even more painful than killing him. It means that all his previous efforts have turned into bubbles. But it was not over yet. This person's character is unrighteous, corrupting the cardinal guides. He is a disgrace to the scholars of the realm. Expel him to his ancestral home, never to be employed again. Never to be employed again. These words thoroughly severed any remaining hope in Lawrence's life. Not only can he no longer be an official, but even his qualification to participate in the examinations has been permanently stripped away. From a disciple of the Son of Heaven with a boundless future, he has completely fallen into a stained outcast, despised and abandoned by the entire scholarly community. Furthermore, the Emperor's voice rang out again. The levirate marriage he intended to perform is an act of incest that defies heavenly principles. The court of the imperial clan and the Ministry of Justice shall jointly try the Tang family for improper family traditions and lax discipline. The entire clan is to be reprimanded and rectified. Phoebe failed to maintain women's virtue and corrupted public morals. Hand her over to the local officials for strict surveillance, and she is forbidden from going out. This single decree not only destroyed Lawrence but simultaneously nailed the Tang family and Phoebe to the pillar of shame. Announce this matter to the entire realm as a warning to others. Following the shrill cry of the eunuch, this trial in the imperial court finally came to a close. Lawrence, it is done. It is completely and thoroughly done. He did not even have the chance to offer a single sentence of defense before. Right there in the golden throne hall he desired most, the very emperor he worshipped most personally pronounced his social death sentence. My father stood up from the ground, his expression as calm as before, as if he had just done a trivial thing not worth mentioning. But I knew he had won this game cleanly and decisively. He used the most upright and open method, borrowing the emperor's knife to kill, and making everyone submit wholeheartedly. That is a true powerful official conquering the opponent without fighting. The imperial decree was transmitted very quickly. When the eunuch announcing the decree appeared with his entourage in front of the Tang residence gates, the entire Tang family was still immersed in an unrealistic fantasy. They likely assumed that at most, the emperor would reprimand him with a few sentences and dock his salary for a few months, and once the storm passed, everything could start over. However, when that shrill voice read out the words, strip his title, and never to be employed again, Lawrence's father, Master Tang, immediately fainted on the spot. Madame Tang collapsed to the ground, wailing miserably. As for Lawrence himself, after hearing each of those verdicts, he was first stunned like a wooden statue, and immediately after, a mouthful of fresh blood suddenly sprayed out, dyeing the front of his robe red. No, impossible. This is not the truth. he muttered to himself, his gaze unfocused, completely unable to accept this reality. The glory of 10 years of study, the dream of bringing honor to his ancestors, the future of rising through the ranks. Everything turned to ash within this single imperial decree. However, this was only the beginning. As soon as the decree was handed down, the Tang residence immediately became a plague that everyone in the capital avoided. Those old friends and relatives who had previously come to flatter and ingratiate themselves now hid far away. A more fatal blow came from the Tang clan itself. That afternoon, the patriarch of the Tang clan personally arrived at the door leading several clan elders. They had not come to offer comfort, but to enforce family law. "Lawrence, you are truly an unfilial descendant." The patriarch pointed straight at his nose, shaking with anger. "You committed such an act that insults our customs and corrupts morals, implicating the entire clan in disgrace. What face do you have left to meet our ancestors?" In order to preserve the reputation of the Tang clan, after a discussion by the entire clan, it has been decided that starting today, your branch is expelled from the clan and your names struck from the genealogy. From this day forth, your life, death, glory, and disgrace have no relation whatsoever to the Tang surname. Expulsion from the clan, this was a punishment even heavier than being stripped of his title. It meant that Lawrence had become rootless, a drifting duckweed, a person discarded by his very own ancestors. Lawrence's parents knelt on the ground, begging bitterly, but they received only the cold gaze of the patriarch. "You taught your son strictly, so you share the same guilt. If not for the sake of the same clan ancestry, even you would have been expelled." In the end, Lawrence, along with his father who was still in a coma, his mother who was going mad with weeping, and Phoebe carrying a bastard child in her belly, were chased out of the great Tang residence like garbage. They lost everything, their house, their land, their servants. Everything belonging to the clan was taken back. In just one night, they fell straight from the blue clouds into the muddy mire. I listened to the steward bring the news back, and not a ripple rose in my heart, pitiful, perhaps, but all of this was brought upon himself. From the moment he chose to humiliate me on the day of the grand wedding, and chose to challenge the rules, he should have thought of an ending like this. People must pay the price for their own choices. The storm engulfing the Tang family subsided very quickly. The capital is a place that forgets most easily, new topics arise every day, and only occasionally did people still mention that short-lived third scholar as a negative example to warn their descendants. As for me, Elizabeth, I also gradually withdrew from the center of that storm, fading from the public eye. Many people speculated about my future. Some said, although she is the daughter of a minister, she has had an annulment and her reputation is damaged. I fear it will be difficult for her to find a good husband in the future. Others said, Minister Gu has high power. He will certainly find an even better marriage for her to wash away the humiliation. They all guessed wrong. One afternoon, I personally brewed a pot of tea for father and expressed my intentions. Father, in this life, your daughter does not wish to marry again. The hand holding the teacup paused for a moment, then very quickly recovered its composure. He looked at me and asked, "Why? Is it because the matter with Lawrence has made your heart cold?" I shook my head. "No, your daughter will not stop eating just because of a hiccup. It is simply that after this incident, I have thought things through clearly. Placing my lifelong happiness on a man is inherently a massive gamble. If I win the bet, perhaps I will be peaceful for a lifetime. If I lose, it would be just like this time, nearly leading to eternal damnation. Your daughter does not wish to gamble anymore." I stood up and walked to the window, looking at the crabapple blossoms blooming in the courtyard. "Father, you taught me to read books, taught me to understand principles, and taught me to see the state of the world clearly. My vision should not be confined only to this inner courtyard. I want to do something of my own." Father remained silent for a long time, so long that I thought he would not agree. A long time later, he slowly opened his mouth. "What do you want to do?" I turned around, a light shining in my eyes that had never been there before. "I want to open an academy that only accepts female students." In Father's eyes, a look of genuine astonishment appeared for the first time. "An academy for women?" "Yes," I replied firmly. "Most noble ladies in the capital only learn the 4 arts to please their husbands. But I believe that women reading books should not be just for that purpose. I want to teach them history to understand the rise and fall of things, teach them mathematics so they can manage assets, and even teach them a bit of simple law so they know how to protect themselves when facing injustice." I hope the women of the capital can live more consciously and independently. Their value should not be defined solely by the men they marry. Father looked at me quietly, his gaze complex. There was surprise, there was worry, but more than anything, there was a comfort and pride that was hard to put into words. He suddenly laughed out loud. Good, he set the teacup down heavily on the table. You are truly worthy of being the daughter of Alexander. You have such spirit, far surpassing those men of the world. Just go ahead and do it. The location, connections, and initial capital, Father will prepare them all for you. Even if the sky falls, Father is here to hold it up for you. At that moment, my eyes grew hot. I knew that from this moment on, my life would open a completely new chapter. Without Lawrence, without the constraints of marriage, I would live for myself, living as a beam of light, not dependent on anyone. 1 year later, on Vermilion Bird Street, the most prosperous street in the capital, a complex named Elizabeth's Academy officially opened. At that time, this event caused a huge shock in the capital. For an unmarried woman to show her face in public and open an academy that only accepted female students was truly something rarely seen since ancient times. Initially, very few people responded, most only came to watch for the novelty or to make sarcastic remarks, but I was not discouraged. I utilized my father's connections to invite several highly respected old scholars with enlightened thinking, and a few merchant wives skilled in business to serve as guest lecturers for the academy. I personally compiled the academy's regulations and curriculum. In addition to traditional poetry and etiquette, I added practical subjects such as financial management, law, medicine, and appraisal. On the opening day, I announced to everyone, if any student of Elizabeth's Academy faces unreasonable oppression from her husband's family in the future, the Academy will provide free legal assistance. This clause immediately caused an explosion among the noble women of the capital. The first to enroll was the daughter of the Vice Minister of Revenue. She did not want to marry a notorious playboy and was fiercely resisting her family. I accepted her and even personally stepped forward, applying the tactical maneuvers Father taught me to analyze the pros and cons with the vice minister, finally causing him to give up on that marriage. As soon as this story spread, Elizabeth's Academy immediately became famous. More and more noble girls, with the support of their families, walked into my academy. Here, they were no longer goods waiting to be chosen, but independent individuals with thoughts of their own. Their horizons broadened, and their methods became increasingly mature. They began to learn how to manage their own dowries, how to protect themselves within complex inner courtyard relationships, and how to possess a piece of the sky for themselves. Elizabeth's Academy gradually became the place most yearned for by the noble girls of the capital. As for me, Elizabeth, I also went from the pitiful woman whose marriage was annulled by the third scholar in the mouths of others, to the person everyone respectfully called Headmistress Gu. Every day, I taught in the academy, managed properties, and conversed with the madams and young ladies of various manners. My life was full and free. I proved that a woman does not need to rely on a man to live a flourishing life, even a more brilliant one. Another spring arrived, and my carriage passed through Vermilion Bird Street. The traffic was heavy, and the prosperity remained as before. Suddenly, a commotion came from a street corner. I lifted the carriage curtain, and saw a man dressed in rags, his whole body reeking of alcohol, holding a jar of wine, crying and laughing in the middle of the street. I am the third scholar personally appointed by His Majesty. Elizabeth is my wife. You are not allowed to talk about her. It is all her fault, it is she who ruined me. No, I was wrong. He spoke incoherently, sometimes laughing madly, other times wailing miserably. The people around pointed at him, treating him as a joke. My maid let out a soft cry. Miss, is that not Lawrence? It was him. Although his appearance was haggard and he looked no different from a beggar, I still recognized him immediately. The third scholar who was once dashing and elegant had now fallen to this state. I heard that after being expelled from the clan, Lawrence was forced to return to his hometown. A scholar who had never done a day of labor, he was utterly helpless. His world crumbled further when the woman he sacrificed everything for abandoned him, leaving him to descend into the madness I now saw before me. One blow after another finally completely crushed him. He went mad. Wandering and begging, he eventually returned to the capital, the place where his dreams had shattered. At this moment, he seemed to see my carriage. The Gu family crest on it was so dazzling. His cloudy eyes suddenly lit up. He threw away the wine jar and rushed frantically toward my carriage. Elizabeth, it is Elizabeth. My wife has come to pick me up. The carriage driver immediately raised his whip to drive him away. No need. I spoke calmly to stop him. I did not avoid him, nor did I get off the carriage. I simply looked at him quietly through the curtain. He threw himself at the carriage, but was blocked by the guards. He could only crawl on the ground, lifting his head to look at me, his face covered in tears and snot. Elizabeth, I was wrong. I was truly wrong. Can you forgive me? Let us start over. I will take the exams again. I will definitely pass again. We will get married. You will be my wife, and we do not need Phoebe anymore. He was immersed in his own delusions, repeating those words over and over. I looked at him. In my heart, there was no hatred, nor was there pity, only a vast indifference, as if looking at a stranger who had absolutely no relation to me. Let us go. I lowered the carriage curtain and softly gave the order. The carriage rolled forward again, leaving his wailing cries far behind. Lawrence, you were wrong. What you lost was never a wife but a completely new life, something you can never reach again. As for me, I have long lived in that life and lived as my own king. The reputation of Elizabeth's Academy spread further and further, eventually even reaching the palace. One day, a magnificent ceremonial procession stopped in front of the Academy gates. The chief female official of the palace came personally to deliver a decree, stating that Her Majesty the Empress was very interested in the teaching methods of my academy, and specially summoned me to the palace for an audience. I changed into attire appropriate for the etiquette, and followed the female official into the palace. At the Palace of Earthly Tranquility, I was granted an audience with the Empress, the mother of the realm. She was graceful and noble, yet her eyes carried gentleness and wisdom. She did not ask about the old matters between me and Lawrence, but meticulously asked about the Academy's courses as well as my views on women's education. I held nothing back regarding my philosophy and shared it all with her. I told her, women are not appendages of men, nor are they merely tools for reproduction. They have independent thoughts and the ability to create value. Letting them read books and understand principles is not to fight for power with men, but so they can better manage their families, assist their husbands, and educate future generations, thereby strengthening the foundation of the nation. The Empress nodded continuously as she listened, her eyes filled with appreciation. Headmistress Gu's words fit very well with my own thoughts. She granted me a seat and bestowed upon me premium fragrant tea. I hear that the students of your academy are now the model domestic managers in the capital. Not only do they manage their husbands' households in an orderly manner, but they can also offer strategies for their husbands' careers. It is truly rare. That is all due to their own intelligence. Your subject dares not claim credit. I replied humbly. The Empress smiled and suddenly said, my little princess will reach school age next year. I wonder if Headmistress Gu is willing to accept the student. My heart shook violently, and I immediately stood up to bow. It is the honor of your subject to allow the princess to enroll. What kind of honor was that? This was the greatest affirmation from the royal family toward me and toward Elizabeth's academy. When the news spread, the status of the academy was immediately elevated to an unprecedented height, and the threshold was nearly worn down by visitors. I became the most sought-after figure in the capital. My name no longer needed the prefix, Minister Gu's daughter. Elizabeth, these three words in themselves came to represent a kind of glory. My father's political enemies once planned to use the fact that I showed my face in public and opened an academy to attack him. They said his family discipline was not strict, allowing his daughter to be unruly. In court, father only smiled faintly. What my daughter is doing has been personally praised by Her Majesty the Empress, and the princess will also enroll. I do not know if Censor Wang is dissatisfied with my daughter, or if he has some objection to the decision of Her Majesty the Empress. One sentence left that Censor speechless, cold sweat pouring down his back. From then on, no one dared to gossip half a word about me or Elizabeth's academy. That night, father rarely sat in my small courtyard, drinking with me as the moonlight spilled like water across the yard. Elizabeth. Father took a sip of wine and looked at me, his eyes carrying a few degrees of sentiment. I am old. You are still in your prime. I filled his cup. No, it is my state of mind that is old. He shook his head. I once thought that finding you a good marriage and letting you live a life of peace and wealth was the greatest success of a father. Thinking back now, father was wrong. He looked at me, his eyes overflowing with pride and comfort. Letting you break through on your own, opening up a sky that belongs to you with your own hands, and watching you live as you do today, that is the greatest pride of father in this life. agreeing to let you annul the marriage back then, and agreeing to let you open the academy, were the most correct decisions father has made in his entire life. My eyes became slightly wet as I raised my wine cup. Your daughter toasts father, in this life, to be your daughter is truly the fortune of 3 lifetimes. Father and daughter looked at each other, smiled and drank together. I knew I had the best father in the world. He gave me life, and he gave me the right to choose and the courage to live my own life. I heard that Phoebe's life was very difficult. She followed that merchant for not long before she was abandoned. Carrying a child whose father was unknown, and having no skills to make a living, she could only rely on odd jobs like washing clothes to scrape by day to day. Once, she asked someone to send a message to me, wanting to see me once to beg for alms. I told the servant to reply with 2 words: no meeting. I am not a saint. Toward a person who nearly destroyed my entire life, I cannot bring myself to repay resentment with virtue. Later, I heard that due to destitute circumstances, she latched onto a wealthy merchant. But that merchant's wife was a formidable woman. She led people to beat Phoebe severely, slashed her face, and threw her into a ruined temple outside the city. After that, there was no more news of her. Perhaps she died of illness, or perhaps she starved to death. In short, the woman who once delusionally hoped to use her belly to climb high and step on me to rise was finally swallowed up by her own greed and ignorance until nothing was left. Lawrence's madness came and went. When sober, he would sit at the street corner, writing his name over and over again, writing the words, "Third Scholar," until his fingertips were ground to bleeding. He said he had to remember who he once was. When the madness took him, he would mistake every woman wearing fine clothes passing by for me. He would collapse to the ground, begging miserably, and speaking all those words of repentance. He became a grotesque spectacle of the capital, a living warning bell. Whenever scholars came to the capital for examinations, the elders in their families would point at his back and lecture them. Do you see that? That is the ending of one whose virtue does not match his position. To read books, one must first learn to be a human being. His existence was etched deeper than any lecture in the books of sages. He used his entire ruined life to write the most tragic annotation for the word, virtue. As for me, occasionally passing by in a carriage and hearing his mad ravings, my heart had long since ceased to have any ripples. Regret. His regret had long since ceased to have any meaning to me. My life had already rushed toward another region, a vast sea of stars that he could never touch. 3 years later, Elizabeth's Academy had become the model for female education in the Great Zhou dynasty. The properties under my name were spread throughout the capital. Silk shops, tea houses, and rouge stores were all prospering. I no longer needed to rely on the protection of the Gu family. I myself had become a wealthy and powerful family. The emperor even made a special exception to bestow upon me the title of Lady of Virtue to commend my contributions to enlightenment. I became the first woman in the history of Great Zhou to receive a title while unmarried. That day was the Academy's graduation ceremony. I stood on the high platform, looking down at the young faces full of vitality and confidence below. Among them, some would later become the wives of great generals, and some would become female merchants. But regardless of what their future status might be, they had all been at Elizabeth's Academy, learning independence, how to think, and how to hold their own destiny in their hands. That is the greatest achievement of my life. The ceremony ended, and I walked alone to the highest floor of the Academy. Leaning on the railing and gazing out, the prosperity of the entire capital was captured in my eyes. Far away, amidst the beggars at the street corner, the intermittent murmurs of that madman seemed to drift over again. I am the 3rd scholar. Elizabeth, I am the 3rd scholar. That sound was both near and far. I withdrew my gaze and looked toward the sky even further away. There, clouds rolled and waves rose, a magnificent atmosphere. I smiled. Lawrence, you were wrong. You thought I annulled the marriage to take revenge on you. Actually, I did it only to fulfill myself. In this world, is there a kind of completeness that does not need a beloved, does not need marriage, but can be reached by relying only on oneself? Having me, Elizabeth, is the best answer. I do not need a prince to bestow a crown, nor do I need a general to don armor. In this realm that I have built with my own hands, I have crowned myself king. Elizabeth's journey teaches us that a woman's value is never defined by her marital status or a man's approval, but by the strength of her own character. When faced with public humiliation, she chose dignity over compromise, proving that walking away from a toxic is not failure, but a powerful redirection. True success is not found in seeking revenge, but in building a life so brilliant that the past no longer matters. We must learn that we do not need to wait for a prince to grant us a crown. We possess the power to build our own kingdom and reign over it with grace and independence. The story ends here for now. If it touched your heart or left you thinking, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Please like, subscribe,